My name is Corinna, and in this presentation, I'm going to talk about bullfighting. More concretely, the fact that this practice is still legal, defended, and enjoyed by many people. Using terms such as cultural heritage and human rights, they are legitimizing a practice that encourages the use of animals for human entertainment, a culture of violence, and the persistent idea that the interests of animals are insignificant compared to the interests of people. For reasons of length, we will mostly focus on Spanish bullfighting, but giving some examples of other countries as well. First of all, let me point out something very obvious. Bullfighting has nothing to do with a fair fight, as the end is determined before the beginning. The bull will die. While the English term bullfighter implies that the person will fight the bull, the Spanish term matador makes it clear that the person will kill the bull, as matador translates to killer. This presentation starts with the definition of bullfighting, mentioning the different variations of the practice in different parts of the world, and giving an overview of the origin of Spanish bullfighting, as well as the legal context in Spain. In order to better understand the persistence of the practice, the presentation will highlight the main economic, political, cultural, and moral arguments influencing the debate. Then, we are looking at the biggest welfare concerns surrounding the practice, such as unnecessary suffering, stress, injuries, and death. Based on the previous slides, we will elaborate some recommendations on how to move towards the abolishment of the practice, before giving a summary of the past 15 minutes. There are different variations and styles of bullfighting, but its main characteristic is that it is a physical contest between humans and animals. The classic style of bullfighting, also called the Spanish bullfighting, is still practiced in Spain and various Latin American countries. The bullfighter fights a huge bull in a coliseum in front of an audience, and uses a cape to taunt the bull during the fight, encouraging the animal to run towards him, as you can see in the picture. The bullfighter is aiming to plant long spikes in the bull's back to make him bleed. Eventually, the animal is exhausted and killed, and the audience cheers for the man's victory. This type of bullfighting is divided into three parts that will be described later in this presentation: the third of lancing, the third of banderillas, and the third of death. Besides the Spanish style, CES International, a worldwide anti-bullfighting organization, lists 9 other types of bullfighting on their website. The differences between the different types mainly lie in the age and sex of the animal, whether it is killed in the arena, in a slaughterhouse or not at all, whether it is injured at all, and whether the person fighting the bull sits on a horseback. For example, in the Portuguese style, the bullfighter sits on a horse, and the bull is killed in the slaughterhouse, not in front of the audience. The bullfights we know today date back to the 18th century, but they have historical roots in pre-Christian times. In various ancient civilizations, bulls played important roles both in religion, rituals, and entertainment, for instance in ancient Crete, Rome, or the Assyrian Empire. Some scholars claim, based on archaeological evidence indicating bull worshipping, that the Spanish bullfight has an autochthonous origin. We may never know for certain where the Spanish bullfight has emerged, but we do know that throughout the Middle Age and beyond, feasts including bull games with elements of hunting were popular, particularly as a sport for the noble and rich on the Iberian Peninsula. In the 18th century, Francisco Romero was the first known man to fight the bull on foot instead of on the horseback, attracting more attention from the audience. Based on his fight, the modern bullfight began to evolve, and riding noblemen were replaced by commoners on foot. In addition, bullfighting started to be performed as an individual commercial activity outside traditional feasts and became oriented to a massive public composed of all the social classes. Classic bullfighting is legal in 8 countries: Spain, France, Portugal, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, and Ecuador. After the fight, the bull is killed either in front of the audience or in privacy. In other countries, such as the United States or India, different variations of bullfights are legal, for instance bloodless bullfights in California, under some circumstances. In Spain, the country this presentation is focusing on, bullfighting remains legal on the national level. The Spanish Congress passed a law that declared bullfighting cultural heritage in 2013. However, there are different regional regulations. Already in 1991, the Canary Islands passed a law to protect bulls, including a clause against animal abuse in bullfights or local fiestas. Catalonia followed with a law banning bullfighting in 2010, and the Balearic government did the same in 2016. However, in the same year, Spain's constitutional court overturned the bans, arguing that the matter could only be handled by the central government. Now, it is interesting that the Constitutional Court became interested in the matter after the 2010 law in Catalonia and not earlier. But we have to remember that Catalonia has been trying to gain independence from Spain for years, and this bullfighting ban was perceived as an attempt by Catalan nationalists to distinguish the region from the rest of Spain. The rule from the Spanish Constitutional Court, on the other hand, was perceived as an attempt by the Spanish state to maintain legal and political control over the region. Directly after the ban in Catalonia, the region of Madrid declared bullfighting a protected art form in 2010. By doing so, the regional government granted bullfighting the same protection status as historical buildings and monuments, allowing for advantages such as special tax breaks for organizers of bullfights. The regions of Valencia and Murcia immediately followed the decision of their capital and declared the bullfight part of their protected cultural patrimony. What is so dangerous with these decisions is that there are fines for those who damage protected cultural patrimony. In Madrid, they go from 60,000 euros to 1.2 million euros, meaning that strictly speaking, people trying to stop bullfights could be taken to court and fined for damaging protected cultural patrimony. There have been attempts to deal with the issue on the EU level, but the Protocol on Protection and Welfare of Animals to the Treaty of Amsterdam, which has passed into the Lisbon Treaty, makes it clear that the community and the member states shall pay full regard to the welfare requirements of animals, while respecting the legislative or administrative provisions and customs of the member states, relating in particular to religious rights, cultural traditions, and regional heritage. As bullfighting falls under this category, it is unaffected by any measures on the European level. There are different arguments people that defend bullfighting are using. Broadly, they can be split into four categories: economic, political, cultural, and moral arguments. Advocates for the activity argue that it is a big business and source of income for the Spanish economy. The National Association of Bullfighting Event Organizers released a report claiming that the sector contributed over 1.5 billion euros to the Spanish economy in 2013. The report also claims that bullfighting has employed 57,000 people directly, as well as generating 142,000 indirect jobs. Bullfighting is a popular tourist attraction, and Spain is one of the main destinations for Western tourists, many of whom feel that seeing a bullfight is a necessary part of their holiday. However, one should not overestimate the importance of foreign tourist demands for bullfights, as Spanish visitors are still constituting the majority of visitors during the event. The bull and bullfights have a deep significance to the Spanish self-image, and for many people the bull is an almost sacred creature. So one should not underestimate the role the animal plays as a national symbol. It is clear that, at least to some extent, the battle to abolish bullfights also represents the battle between the Spanish central government and regional governments, where the former wants to maintain a position of power and control that it has held in the past, and the latter want to gain more independence. For hundreds of years, bullfighting has been a large part of the Spanish culture and continues to play a role even today. However, it has nowadays become a controversial subject, with some people seeing it as an integral part of the Spanish culture and others opposing the violent tradition. Still, as of today, bullfighting, similarly to flamenco dancing, is considered one of the most important emblems of the country. The head of the conservative regional government in Madrid in 2010, when the region passed a law that increased the protection of bullfighting, said that bullfighting is an art form that deserves to be protected and that has been part of the Mediterranean and Spanish culture since time immemorial. Goya, Picasso, Garcia Lorca, and from abroad Hemingway and Orson Welles have all dealt with bullfighting as an art form. Most modern Spanish philosophers oppose bullfighting as a barbarous relic of the past, standing on the way of the modernization of their country. One of the most systematic defenders of bullfighting is French philosopher Francis Wolff. He insists that bullfighting is not torture, bulls do not suffer, bulls must die, and bullfighting traditions must be preserved. Unfortunately, it would take too much time to discuss all of his arguments, so I will just explain his claim that bullfighting is not torture. Wolff claims that an activity can only be considered torture if the goal is to make the victim suffer. In bullfighting, however, the goal is to generate an artistic expression, and therefore bullfighting cannot be seen as torture. Further, if bullfights were actual torture, the bull would not fight back, it would try to flee. While the economic, cultural, and political arguments may not be strong enough to defend the practice of bullfighting, they are not per se flawed or wrong. However, the lack of Spanish philosophers defending the practice and the questionable arguments Wolff is presenting require countering this statement. First of all, animals and humans react differently to stressful and painful situations, the so-called fight or flight response, and therefore the argument that the bull must enjoy the fight because it's not trying to flee is wrong. But more importantly, just because the goal of an action is not to make the victim suffer, it does not mean that the action doesn't cause any harm. An action can very well be immoral and illegal, even if the intent was not to make someone suffer. There are various welfare concerns surrounding bullfights. The aim of a bullfight is to physically debilitate and psychologically torment the bull for around 20 minutes. It is also alleged that prior to the fight, bulls are struck hard in their testicles, given tranquilizers so they will not be overly aggressive, and oil is put on their eyes in order to obstruct their vision. In the first stage of a bullfight, the aim is to puncture the neck of the animal with a sharp weapon, damaging muscles, veins, nerves, and bone structures, amongst others. At this stage, the bull loses around 8 to 18% of his blood volume. The second stage involves the planting of 6 harpoons into the shoulders of the bull, increasing the pain previously caused and causing more loss of blood. The last stage is about killing the bull. First, the bullfighter introduces a sword in his chest, destroying various anatomical structures such as bronchi, lungs, and large blood vessels. If the animal doesn't die, the bullfighter uses another sword with the aim of severing the spinal cord and/or part of the brainstem. As a consequence, the bull is unable to move. If the animal is still alive, the bullfighter's assistant stabs a knife blade into the brain area, producing a slow stop of cardiac and breathing functions and brain disconnection. Besides the anatomical damages described, post-mortem studies show over 32 altered blood parameters and acidity in the blood, caused by the amount of lactate produced by the animal's body in an attempt to cope with a physically and mentally stressful situation. When looking at this so-called spectacle from an animal welfare perspective, one immediately sees how bullfighting violates almost every aspect of the Five Freedoms model. Besides respecting the freedom from hunger and thirst, after all, visitors do not want to see a malnourished bull, bullfights fail to respect the Five Freedoms. Being tormented and injured in front of a cheering crowd not only leads to discomfort, injuries, and pain, but also to increased levels of fear and stress. And to think bullfighting allows bulls to engage in natural behavior is simply wrong. Bulls are typically peaceful animals that spend the main part of their life eating grass, sleeping, and playing with each other. An activity that involves animals to be stressed, exhausted, injured, and killed for entertainment, celebration, or sport clearly produces suffering in the animal. It is clear that the Spanish government will not adopt an anti-bullfighting law anytime in the near future. However, individuals, institutions, local and regional governments that want to see the practice abolished are not as powerless as some might think. Surveys showed that the number of locals interested in bullfights declined from 55% in 1971 to 19% in 2016, and there is a significant difference between generations. While bullfights are still popular in the over 45 age group, young people prefer other activities such as football games. In a free market, demand determines supply. Both locals and tourists have the choice to no longer participate in this violent practice. If less and less people want to see a bullfight, less and less bullfights will be organized. Organizations and service providers, both directly or indirectly benefiting from bullfights, should stop supporting the practice. The League Against Cruel Sports has convinced a number of travel operators to cease promotion of bullfighting, including Airbnb, EasyJet, and TripAdvisors. Organizers of bullfight could instead organize other activities linked to Spanish culture that are not depending on making an animal suffer. But also other organizations that are not linked to the activity at all can help by making donations to anti-bullfighting organizations and promoting animal welfare standards, as well as increasing awareness amongst their clients. In 1989, the Catalan city Tossa del Mar became the first self-declared anti-bullfighting town in the world, meaning that it adopted municipal policies that do not support the practice of bullfighting within its territory. According to PETA, bullfighting has been banned in at least 100 towns in Spain. Barcelona has seen several efforts to join this group, but none has been entirely successful so far. However, it managed to impose some restrictions, for instance an age limit for visitors of bullfights. Despite the high protection status of bullfights on a national level, the Balearics were able to pass a law that practically makes a bullfight impossible. Their law on the protection of animals includes a ban on the use of horses and sharp implements in the rings, a 10-minute limit on fights, and the prohibition of alcohol in stadiums. Although the law does not de facto prohibit a bullfight, it makes it practically impossible to organize one. Other regions desiring to put an end to the practice against the rule of the Constitutional Court could implement similar legislation. Although it used to play an important role in the history and culture of Spain and other countries, bullfighting is less and less popular. Many people start to see the activity for what it is, not entertainment, but a violent and barbaric act of the past. Defenders of the practice argue that it is an important part of Spain's culture and economy. While it is true that bullfighting contributes to the Spanish economy, the same argument was once used to defend slavery. No matter the economic benefit, some activities and traditions do not have a place in a modern nation. More than half a century ago, Mahatma Gandhi stated that the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. In my opinion, a nation that not only legalizes torturing and killing animals in order to entertain people, but actually claims this violent activity defines its culture and its national identity, has no place in the Europe of the 21st century. As time moves forward, cultures move forward, change, create new traditions, and forget about old ones. This is how it has always been. It is up to us to critically reflect about our traditions, such as bullfighting, and decide whether or not they should still be a part of our modern societies. Thank you very much for listening.